Well, hello there, and a big warm welcome back to the Health and Safety Digest, a special podcast by Astutis. I am your host, the digital content writer at Astutis, Toby Howell, and as ever, I will be your guide through this deep, weird, and fascinating voyage into health and safety environmental training. This week, we're back at it again with the NEBOSH Diploma for Occupational Health and Safety Management Professionals. The wording is still trying to trip me up, but this week we're looking into the different learning methods that essentially will be taking you through that experience. We're going to be looking into the online, the distance, the classroom, and of course, the new special offering that is the virtual classroom. We cannot wait to share these new experiences with our learners, and therefore this is such an important episode for us to be able to put out to you. So we're not going to take up any much more of your time. We're going to get talking to Bren because I know he's excited to speak to you after this. The next question I wanted to ask you, Bren, was regarding different learning methods, because obviously with the new syllabus update, there comes a new learning method. But firstly, why should people undergo the online learning course?
Okay, I mean, good question, Toby. Yeah, so we've looked to design our courses in a way that will give people options. So historically, you might expect to be taught in a classroom by an experienced health and safety professional, and tutor will be able to impart their knowledge, and you'll be working in a group with other people, and that will support you on your adventures. So and that does work, very, very well for a lot of people, but it doesn't work well for everybody. People are different in many ways. We mentioned earlier, the motivation is very important, but personality type is going to be a consideration in terms of what approach to learning is going to work best for you. There will be many learners in the classroom who feel a little bit shy, feel a little bit reticent about getting involved, and don't want to speak in case they embarrass themselves and so on. There's no such thing as a stupid question in a health and safety training course, by the way, but you sort of understand why people get a little bit nervous and apprehensive and so on. And if you are one of those people that is a bit of a wallflower, you can still cope in the classroom. Legitimate peripheral participation is the technical term. Just sit back and absorb it, and don't get involved with the interaction, because you don't need it, and it's not for you. Speaking from my own personal sort of learning experiences over the years, I realised very, very early on that I don't want to work in teams with people. I just want to get on with things myself.
Okay.
I think I'm a reasonably sociable person, but when it comes to learning, I do find a degree of discomfort in working with other people who see things differently to the way I see them,
Right.
or maybe struggle to keep up with the pace I want to work at, and so on. So personally, I get a lot of satisfaction from learning at my own pace, largely by myself. And again, the caveats left, right, and centre, because even though I prefer to work on my own rather than in a team, there are always going to be occasions where I'll need help from someone.
Right.
I'm not going to know just from my textbooks or my online resources or whatever. I'm not going to be able to work out the answer to everything myself necessarily, and I will, take advantage of tutor support and online forums for asking questions and hopefully getting some peer input. So again, horses for courses, I guess. Why would somebody generally look at online rather than traditional classroom? I think there's a whole range of considerations. practically, the price point and the cost is going to be a consideration for many people. Accessibility in terms of where can we realistically, particularly in the current world, where can we realistically deliver classroom training and where can't we? And until quite recently, where can we run classroom exams and where can't we? So the move to online sort of removes a lot of those sorts of barriers. And as I've been waxing lyrical about, like I said, people that are more independent learners. My dad used to say to me when I was a kid, "You're a good book learner, you are, but you've got no common sense." I mean, I hope that the common sense caught up along the way. I don't think there are many 16-year-olds that have got common sense, but I can make sense of a textbook usually, and I can make sense of information off the internet usually. I can pull information, I can process it, I can make sense of it, I can apply it, and usually I'm going to be reasonably comfortable with it. Therefore, I can work at my own pace, and generally I'm a happy bunny. But I still like to know there's some support networks there for those, about 10% of the time maybe, where I think I've worked it out, but I could do with some reassurance, or no, actually, Bren, you're kidding yourself. You can't work it out at all, and you need a grown-up to help you. So I think, if you're from a traditional academic background, if you are task focused, if you don't particularly want the distractions of the group dynamic, if you feel better about your learning when you're setting your own pace and driving your own agenda, then online learning or distance learning will suit you very much. Like I said, we do try to design in the support networks there so that you've got support as and when you need it, but it's learning driven by the learner rather than driven by a tutor or a trainer.
The impetus is in the learner's hands.
Yeah, very much.
Okay, brilliant. Well, the next question in regards to the learning methods probably would have been the new virtual classroom, because I think we're all very excited here about it and what it means and what it's bringing to the table for each and every learner. It's gaining in its popularity, but why exactly should learners or inquiring learners, potential learners, look towards that platform and think that one's for me?
Yeah, okay. Again, when the world suddenly changed last March and we went into first lockdown, and classroom training just stopped dead, if that's not too offensive a term. We needed to find solutions. We were quite fortunate in that we were doing quite a fair bit of webinar delivery, sort of online tutor support sessions for certificate and diploma level training. But at that stage, we hadn't tried teaching the whole course virtually. These were more tutorial type, revision type sessions, which were being well received. So we had some of the technology, and we did have some experience, and we were aware of some of the differences in terms of teaching through a virtual classroom environment rather than face-to-face in a conference centre or whatever. And one of the interesting things is the satellite delay a little bit. So when you ask a question face-to-face and you can see the other person, and you know when they're going to, if they're going to come back at you and when they're going to come back at you, it's a little bit more difficult virtually. And even when you look at the learner and they look like they're about to come back at you, it usually takes a couple more seconds than it does in real time in a real classroom. So you've got to get used to taking an extra pause and allowing that to happen. And obviously over the last 12 months, I guess now, as we've been delivering full courses virtually, we've learned a little bit more about the subtleties of delivery in that way. You can certainly approximate most things that you can do in the classroom virtually through Zoom, Teams, WebEx, or whatever. You can break people up into groups, you can have group discussions, you can manage and facilitate feedback, not exactly the same, but you can approximate it, and it can be as effective as it would be in a real classroom. You can use whiteboards, you can use technology in a variety of ways to try to engage the group of learners and individual learners and try to get contribution back from them, so you've got that dynamic that you're always after in terms of learning being a two-way sort of process. You're relying on the learners to pull information from you as a trainer more so than you pushing information out to them and hoping that they're magically going to absorb it like a sponge. So why would people nowadays look to virtual as a first choice rather than going back to a traditional classroom? There are a number of benefits actually. Accessibility, we've mentioned again, removing the need from travel, removing the commute either end of the day, overcoming some of those barriers in terms of social interaction, because you're working with other people, which is beneficial for some, but you don't have to be nice over coffee breaks and be friendly at lunchtimes or whatever if that's not what you want, if that's not where you are, and you're at home and you can dress to suit yourself rather than to impress other people. There are environmental benefits and so on from the lack of travel, and I think from an employer's point of view, there are benefits in terms of managing the overall cost, maybe not the cost of the course and the tuition itself, but the time cost and the knock-on costs of having people away from work and so on can be managed much more effectively than sending people away for block multiple days or block week sessions in a training course in a conference centre somewhere. So for me, I think we've learned a lot through practical delivery. We're looking to use available technology and invest in available technology to make our virtual deliveries as attractive and interesting and engaging as we can. And there are still plenty of challenges with running courses in a real classroom. We had a diploma session in a conference centre last week or the week before last, where one of the learners phoned up and said she was feeling a little bit poorly and she'd just done a lateral flow test and it was positive, which then means that learner needs to arrange a PCR test, and if that PCR test is positive, then she will need to isolate, and anybody who's been a close social contact will need to isolate. So we pivoted quite quickly. We told everybody the circumstances, we sent everybody home, and we delivered the rest of the course virtually. So given that could happen in the middle of any course, at the moment, because the virus is still active out there in the community, somebody could become unwell at any particular point in time, and even with the best hygiene practices and social distancing practices in the classroom, there's still probably a little bit of a risk there that many people are not comfortable with and would prefer to avoid. So virtual again sort of removes that worry from the process.
It sounds, and I'm a big fan of the virtual classroom, Brennan, because it is the safest option. Obviously, we've got the online option, but the idea for me about the virtual classroom, we briefly touched on it before about how there are sometimes shy learners. You're not always necessarily going to be the most sociable learner in a classroom, but the beauty of the virtual classroom is that you can incorporate all the benefits, all the undeniable benefits of the in-classroom learning, and then infuse them with the safety, the accessibility, the ease, and sometimes the social anxiety that can come with education, and you create the virtual classroom. And I've seen various demos, and I've seen snippets of it, and it looks absolutely and runs fantastic, and the interactive nature of it, the engagement. I'm a big fan. So essentially, sorry to steal your thunder there, but to just to recap what you said, it comes from this idea of safety, accessibility, but then also, like I said, then infusing all the benefits of in-classroom learning with the fantastic benefits that an online virtual course can bring you.
Yeah, that's a nice summary, Toby. Yeah, as you say, a little bit more concise than I managed. So yeah, I agree.
Oh, well, there we go. Bren agrees with me. But thank you, as ever, Bren, for that fantastic insight into the different learning methods. That will be it for this week. It's been fantastic being able to get this information out to you guys once again. If you would like more information on the NEBOSH diploma for, take a breath, occupational health and safety management professionals, you can visit our website, www.astutis.com, and there you can find all the different information regarding not just that qualification, but for others also. You can check out our YouTube, our Twitter, our Facebook. Just search Astutis and you will find us. As ever, if you'd like to get your questions answered by Bren, email me directly at toby.howell@astutis.com, and we will make sure that your query, your question, is answered on the next episode. As ever, thank you very much for listening, and we will be speaking to you next time. Stay safe. Bye-bye.